everyone. Please pardon my tardiness a little bit. I was getting my water and I wanted to make sure I had everything in place so I can be comfortable and come to you live right here at Parenting After Dark. My name is Antoinette and I am your host for Parenting After Dark. Thank you for joining me. I started my series, or rather, the first part of tonight's topic, which is what teens wish their parents knew. This is part two, so stay tuned as we dive a little deeper. Hi, thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Antoinette Clay, right here at Parenting After Dark. Happy Sunday. First, let me give a shout out to the Knicks and really just express my sincere congratulations. They worked hard and they won the championship. So I am super excited about that. I am super excited for them. 53 years and they finally got another title. And it was with lots of prayer. Let me tell you, I know I was praying last night. I was just saying, Lord, let it be. Give them supernatural ability to hand-eye coordination, just coordinating with one another and really just making sure they're on top of things. And let me tell you, God is a God of answered prayer. I have to tell you that honestly. So again, shout out to the New York Knicks. We love you and we're so proud of you. So I want to continue my conversation from last week. Last week I started talking about what teens wish their parents knew. I had received some information asked to specifically talk about certain topics, or rather, certain points. Let me reiterate. I was asked to talk about certain points. And I went over the points last week. I won't go over all of them this week. But when I got off the live, and I started thinking about it because that's what I often do after I go on a live. I try to sit quiet to see if the Lord would speak something more to my heart, or if there's something else that I could have brought up or mentioned. And it didn't happen right away, but I think it was like Monday evening, maybe Tuesday of last week, when it dropped in my heart to really go a little bit deeper on the first point, which is life is hard. Teens wish their parents knew, how hard life is. Now, granted, as parents, we know how hard life is, but if we're looking at it from a perspective of a teen, it takes on a very, very different tone. And so there were some things that I sat down and I thought about. I made some notes. And in making those notes, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned them here tonight to go a little deeper into it because I think it's worth mentioning, especially to give clarity and understanding. And as parents, we always need to be clear on what it is that our children are feeling, expressing, what they're going through, what they're thinking, not to be obsessed about it, not to be sort of like that helicopter parent where you try to be involved or know everything, but more or less so that we know how to parent, when we need to step back, when we may need to step forward, when we may need to do a little more praying, a little more, encouraging, and etc. And so to start off with, life is hard for them, right? And they want parents to really know that. But what do they really mean when they say life is hard? And so this is some things that was dropped in my spirit. And if you want to, I would say, explore more, or if you want to um, share some things, if you want to ask a question or whatever, As always, you can email me at the number one parentingafterdark@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment. You can leave a comment. I do have a community in which I post to, and so you can leave a comment there, either there on Instagram or Facebook. You can leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. But life is hard. So for them, life is hard, right? When they mean hard, they mean it's not the typical what as parents, but it's hard just in general for them because if they don't feel prepared to go into adulthood, that can be very scary. And when I say prepared, I mean in terms of life skills. Number one, I don't know too many parents who really talk or really train their children in certain ways. Now, there's the spiritual aspect of that, which I'll get into in a little bit, but the practical aspect of that training is life skills training. And so if they don't really have a strong skill set, like if they don't really, let's just say they don't know how to really deal with, maybe customer service skills, analytical skills, critical thinking. If they don't know how to really negotiate, if they don't know how to really communicate or what to communicate, if you think about skills, there's a spectrum. And so for them, life is hard if they don't really feel like they are prepared. And you can only really be prepared for life if you've been trained and taught certain things, certain skill sets. And so I know for me, a lot of skills that I learned on the job and I learned through the hard knocks of life, right? Just living in the city and hanging out with friends on the street, you learn certain things. When you go to school, you learn certain skills, reading and etc. And then as you again get older, you learn other skills, right? And so if they don't really have the skill set, if they don't really know how to do something, that really puts pressure on them because the expectation is that when they get a certain age, they have to move out and be on their own. And so if they're not really ready for that, that can be really hard for them. And so I like to encourage parents to, with any conversation you're having with your teen, to make sure it's an ongoing conversation, especially around life skills. How to pay bills, how to manage your money. Um, certain things we learn, I know I learned from being passed on. You learn. You learn how to rob Peter to pay Paul. You learn how to push this date back and pay this and all like that. And sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't work, right? And so what we want to do with our kids, we always want to set them on a better path. We always want to give them the better advantage. We want them to have the understanding and the skills and the knowledge to be successful in life. And so if they don't have that skill set, if they just know how to survive and really not live, that's hard and it's scary on top of that. And so I wanted to just dive into this particular not topic, point, life is hard, a little bit more because I felt like I gave a general overview last week, but I wanted to give a more in-depth, thought into this particular point. And so it's hard in general. Now, add on to that if, like my daughter, if they were bullied, or if, there's been some unfortunate trauma in their life, like a loss of a parent early on, or maybe the family as a whole went through some sort of crisis, or if they are failing, maybe in some cases, if they have learning issues that have not been thoroughly explored, and if there's a learning disability that has not been discovered, you can add anything to that. If you add anything onto that, now life gets even much more harder because now they're trying to deal with that, and that takes a certain amount of mental and emotional uh, capacity to do, on top of trying to transition into adulthood. And so I wanted to point that out first, that life skills is very critical. And if they don't have that adequate life skills set in place, or at least enough to where they can start moving and transitioning into adulthood with real confidence, then it's going to be really hard for them. And you're going to find yourself constantly sort of nagging them, and what are you doing, and why are you doing this, and don't you know? And it's not that they don't, and it's not that they are not aware. They are aware. They are very aware, but they don't know how to really tell you. They may not really know how to say it. They may not even be able to conceptualize all of it. But they know that, you know what, hey, I'm not ready. I don't feel prepared. I don't have the skills to really do certain things. And as a result, I really am not ready to be an adult. And there's nothing they can do about it, because as long as we're living, we're going to continue to get older. And so the expectation is going to be for them to, again, at some point, become independent, totally and completely independent of parents, and to begin to live their lives. And if they're not ready for that, that's that's just, they're going to really be kind of stuck. They're going to be stuck. They're not going to be sure, and that can lead to a whole host of problems, because most of the times parents feel like, if their kids are lazy, or if they're not motivated, or whatever the case may be, it's because they don't care, or it's because of whatever. And that's not the case. The case is that they may really lack certain skills to prepare them for adulthood, and they don't really know. Yeah, they'll admit, hey, I goofed off. I wasn't paying attention in school. Now I'm in 11th grade and I got 12 credits. How am I going to get, what is it, 30 credits or so in the next year, so that I can graduate on time? You can admit that, but how do you go about handling that? Does it mean that I have to drop out of school now and get my GED? Like, they think about that, and they understand and aware that there are timelines, right? The things that they have to do in a certain amount of time, or maybe they don't, and maybe they're not aware of that. And so, yes, we can say that the school system in and of itself has its responsibility, but as parents, we're supposed to be the ones training them. And training is ongoing, it's consistent. And so with our teens, we need to understand them as a person, their learning styles, their shortcomings, the areas they need to be worked, that they need work on, where they need to have more grace extended, right? And so I wanted to make that first point, that if they don't have the life skills, then it's going to be really hard for them. Second, they don't know what their purpose is. Now, I don't have the numbers. I did actually want to get the numbers, because I thought it would be good to just share some numbers in that would state how teens really felt about, or really knew or understood their purpose in life. And so if they don't know their purpose, that's going to also make life hard for them, because they don't know what they should be doing. They don't know what they should be focusing on. And that's real talk. And so oftentimes, I know when I was growing up, uh, my parents didn't. talk to me about um, knowing my purpose. I grew up in a time and in an era where you got saved because you didn't want to go to hell, period. There wasn't a such thing, or I wasn't informed or told that there was a calling upon my life. I didn't, that was never talked about. So it was go to church and serve God, literally, right? Whether it's in the choir or whatever, you go to church, you serve God, and you live right. You live holy. And yeah, that's what we did. But there was that missing practical application. And I want to say this to all parents who are believers: there is the spiritual and then there is the natural. And the natural is where you're going to practically apply your understanding when it comes to, you know, knowing what your teen's purpose is. And so I made a note here that that should be your top priority as a parent, is to help them to discover their purpose. Well, Antoinette, how do I do that? First, you're going to pray, Lord, help me. This is your child, or these are your children. You have blessed me with these children. You want me to be a good steward. You want me to be a good parent. You said that I should bring them up in the way that they should go. How do I do that? Who's a deacon? Who's an evangelist? Who's a doctor? Who's a psychologist? Who's a teacher? Who's an apostle? Who's a bishop? Who's a prophet? I came to understand my daughter was flowing in the prophetic as a prophet. I think she was just about 13. And so I was like, how do you even train a child who's a prophet? Well, you have to definitely encourage them to have that relationship with God. And again, this is something that it should be in alignment with them, which means that you should be introducing them, taking them to church with you, and talking about Christ all the time. And not in the strong Old Testament, thou shalt not way, but in a practical, everyday way, using everyday teachable moments to introduce Christ and to talk about Christ and to share that with them. And God will begin to show you. I never shared this before, but I'll share it now. When I found out I was pregnant, I had just rededicated my life to the Lord. And so I immediately was like, oh my God, what are people in the church going to think? She just got saved and now she's pregnant. But I was already pregnant. I wasn't even aware. It wasn't until later in my pregnancy that I really, for some reason, I'm not going to say for some reason, excuse me, no, it was the Lord who put it on my heart. I started reading the Bible out loud because the thought came to me that your child can hear you while they're in the womb. So I started reading the Bible out loud. And guess what I was reading? Y'all, don't laugh because this is real talk. I started reading Old Testament prophets. I was reading Zechariah, Jeremiah. I'm like, what is going on? But I just did it. It wouldn't be until years later that I would discover that my daughter flowed in the prophetic because she was a prophet. And so God had me tuning her ear. Thank you, Lord. Tuning her ear to him while in the womb. And I wasn't even aware. I was just being obedient and flowing in the spirit of the Lord in that regard. And so I'll say that to you. You have to help them discover who they are. I wasn't even aware that when I went to decide her name, I was looking at names, and there was a book that my mother had. To this day, I'm asking the Lord if He can bring it back to my remembrance. But it was a book that she had that had names in it, and as soon as I saw this one name, I was like, "That's her name," and it just flowed. Later on, I would find out that name actually means prophet or one who speaks, an orator. And it would be so funny, and we laugh about it to this day, that in the stores there's a lot of stores that have a lot of Arabs, and so when I would go in the store, they would start jumping and shouting her name and telling me all these things about her name and what it meant, and I was like, what? And it would be funny because she would be a little girl, like 2 years old. She'd be like a toddler, 2 or 3 years old, and they would do it purposely to see her smile and see her laugh, but they would speak and say, "This is what her name is," and just and it was like it was funny for her, but in my mind, I'm like, this is interesting, that her name means this when that wasn't my intention. My intention was to give her a good name, of course, but I didn't know the spiritual aspect of it. And so that goes into the next point that I want to talk about. Our teens, our kids are not just natural beings with physical bodies. They are spiritual as well. They have a spirit that has a soul that lives in the body. And so understanding their purpose means, what has God put them on this earth to do? Who are they spiritually? If they are born again, they are made in the image and likeness of God. Now, who has He called them to be? Has He called them to be a prophet, teacher, evangelist, apostle? Has He called them to be a teacher, a scientist? What has He called them to do? And using what's called a gifting test will help you in that regard. It will at least start you on that path. If you have never thought about this and never even explored this before, this is something that you can do with them to say, hey, let's figure this out together. God definitely has a purpose for you, and we're going to discover what that is. You can either let them take the gifting test on their own so they can do it in their own time, and then they can think about the results or whatever, or you can do it with them. Give them the choice. There's also other kind of tests, and I just want to just highlight real quickly. There's a personality test, to really kind of help you to understand the type of person that they are, so that that will go and flow into who God has called them to be. So they may not be as outgoing and extroverted, or as maybe your one of your other kids, right? Maybe they are completely different in the sense of, you know, they are more introverted or quiet or whatever. Like that will help you to discover that part. And then coupled with the gifting test, you can now say, okay, Lord, show us what direction should we go in? How are we going into this? Because the gifting test is going to test, if I'm not mistaken, now don't get me wrong, don't quote me on this rather. The gifting test is going to test like if they have certain giftings as a leader, as a pastor, as an evangelist, as it's certain things. And so based on the scoring in each category, it'll give you a synopsis of the test. And the highest in one particular area is an indication that that's where, or that's what this person has a gifting, a natural ability to do, and that can point you in the direction in that way. But helping them to understand who they are and the purpose that they've been called to is going to help them to navigate life more. It's going to help put things like expectation and responsibility into perspective for them. So they'll know why they can't go to every party. They'll know why they can't do everything like everyone else. Um, and then the third point I wanted to make, that life is hard because they may not really be ready to take on the full responsibility of being an adult. And I know when I was growing up, parents, I used to hear it all the time. When you get 18, you're out because I don't have to legally take care of you anymore. Wrong thing to do. Wrong thing to do. Just because they're 18, it doesn't mean that they're ready. Yes, legally, by law, you don't have to take care of them, but that's not the plan. If they don't have enough skills, or they don't have any skills at all, And if they don't know what their purpose is doing, they don't know what they're called to do, you're kicking them out. It's like you're putting them on the platter and literally handing them to the world to say, hey, now it's your turn. And you don't want to do that. So if they're not really ready to take on that full responsibility, then you want to say, okay, what's the next steps? I shared with everyone, I shared with you guys before that with my daughter, I was so worried about her just being home after graduation from high school. I was pushing her to go to school, and it wasn't the best thing. But when I stepped back and allowed her to take that time to do her inner reflection and think about what she wants to do, when she was ready, she went to she applied to school, got into school, got scholarships, and took off. And it was like, who, what, when, where, how? Because she was ready to do it in her time. She was ready to move and make that move. And it was a blessing. And I thought, I was like, well, I don't want her to just sit home and do nothing, right? But she didn't. She spent that time really just taking a break, later on for me to realize, with the bullying, that she needed just that break of just being home, being quiet, resting, not having to get up and go, but, just, enjoying her days and the fact that she graduated and the fact that, yes, I do have a plan, but not right now. So don't be in a rush to just put them out and start adulting. If they don't have skills, if they don't know their purpose, if they don't know why they're here, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that if they do want to work, to find the right kind of job. And again, there's multiple tests out there that can kind of help to guide to say, okay, based on your personality, like I had mentioned before, these might be jobs that will suit you. Like you might be really good in customer service, or you might be really good in analysis and running numbers, breaking things down or coming up with solutions, right? Help them to find that perfect job for them, not the perfect job, but the perfect job for them. At least they will have that. And then you can say, hey, okay, now that you're working or whatever, you guys can sit down and negotiate, okay, what bills do you want to, and you work them into this slowly. So you want to pay the light bill, you want to pay cable, you want to pay your phone bill. You help them to start getting on that cycle of making, being committed to monthly responsibility. And that could be a slow process, right? It could be a slow process to help them to get acclimated, to help them understand budgeting. Okay. Um, and the last thing I wanted, well, one more thing I wanted to mention after this is that they may need a mentor. They may need a life coach. And I say that respectfully. One of the things I realized with my daughter was that although I'm a woman and I could teach her a lot of things and help her to understand certain things, there were other people who can speak into her life who can help her in other areas that I could not. I recognized that I didn't know everything. And so I wanted people who were good at finances, people who were good at businesses or whatever it was, to have that, ability to be able to speak into her life and mentor her. People who were spiritually mature to begin to help her to develop as a prophetess, to help her to develop that calling and that gifting of the prophetic, because I couldn't do it all. And so I'm saying that to you in all respect, that you want to get them some type of coach or mentor, somebody who who you trust, who can impart into them information, knowledge, who can help them develop skills so that they can be successful, right, in what they're doing. And that will then help them to boost their confidence so that they can begin to step out, so that they can begin to, step out and say, you know what? I've worked, I've been doing this, I've been saving. I think me and my friend, we're gonna get an apartment and share the expenses, but I'm ready to take that step. And they're doing it in their time when they feel comfortable, when they feel assured, when they feel ready. Because a lot of times being ready to take on responsibility is not, although they want the freedom of adulthood, they may not be ready for the responsibility of it. And that's where it really can get hard for teens because it's like y'all want to be grown, but that comes with not just the freedom of being able to go out and do what you want and hang out, but also with the responsibility of knowing that you have this responsibility. And so, therefore, now you have to do things a little differently and you have to operate within a certain parameter. You have to operate in certain guidelines, right? Certain perspective. You can't just be reckless. You can't just do anything you want to do. But now you have to have these boundaries. You have to, operate as an adult now because now the consequence for you not operating in this way is going to be fully on you. And so they may not be ready for that, right? Again, they're always ready to do all the fun side of adulting, but not the full responsibility and weight of adulting. And so for them, I I just wanted to mention those 3 points. Life is hard because one, if they're not prepared, meaning skill sets, having the skills needed to be successful. If they don't know their purpose, what they're put on this earth to do, what they have been called to do, why they're here, answering that question, why am I here? If they are not ready to take on that responsibility, if they're 18 but they're like, look, I don't know what I want to do, to be quite honest, mom, I don't know if I want to go to college. I don't know what I want to do. Give them the grace to take the time to figure it out. If it's 6 months and you haven't heard anything, don't assume that it's because they've forgotten and they just sitting there not doing nothing. We have to extend the same grace that God extends to us, to our children. We didn't get it right. Some of us came up the rough side of the mountain. And can I say that again for the people in the back? Some of us came up the rough side of the mountain. Some of us went through the valley in the shadow. Everybody had their own experiences in life. So let's extend the grace that we may or may not have been given. Let's extend that to our teens. Let's give them a chance to find out what it is that's in their heart. And the last thing I wanted to mention, and then I'm going to wrap it up, is that they really wish that parents understood that they don't want to let us down. They don't want to disappoint us. That is not something that they want to do. Their behavior may indicate that they are selfish or they don't care or they lack motivation or other things, but that doesn't mean that they they don't care about us and how we see them. They do care. They care about letting us down and being a disappointment, especially for those of you who, like myself, who had absent your partner, the baby's father or mother was absent, wasn't involved. They know this. They don't want to be like that parent. And they don't want you or I or whoever is their parent to see them as that parent. They don't want to be looked upon as a disappointment. They don't want to be looked upon as a mistake. regardless of how they got here or the way they were conceived. And I said that before, and I'll say that as much as I need to. It doesn't matter when, it doesn't matter how they were conceived. Children are a blessing. And I'm going to talk about that because there's certain scriptures that indicate that. And those are the ones that you need to pray and declare over your children's life, what the word of God says, not what you think, and et cetera, et cetera. And so they don't want to disappoint us. They don't want to let us down. They care about what we think. They care about what we believe about them. Thank you, Lord. They care about what we believe about them. And if you tell them you can make it and that you were born to do something great, they're going to believe you. It may take a while now. And I say this in respect. If you have not always spoken good over your kids and your teens, you got to change that. That's number one. Number two, you got to make sure that that is something that you're doing on a regular basis, speaking good about them and speaking over them. And you want to be consistent about doing that because that's important. Because nobody has to tell them that they're not worthy, that they're unloved, uncared for, that they're no good, that they're stupid or ignorant or whatever it is. Nobody is telling them this, yet they have these thoughts and they have these feelings. And so our job is to counteract that. And it's to help them, as the Bible would say, to cast down those false imaginations and high thoughts and bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. They have to learn how to do that, and we have to help them to do that. When they hear that, nope, for the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Get that word. That's why it's important to introduce them to the Lord. Get them a teen Bible. That's every day. I grew up down by the old rugged cross, blessed assurance, okay, gospel. Okay? We read thee, thou, we read it. Now I'm gonna say it, I'm gonna be bold enough. I believe that helped me with my reading skills later on because everything else seemed to be easy after that. But we were raised Old Testament. The luxury of having New International Version and the New Living Translation and the what's the other, the TPT translation and the ESV and English Standard. We didn't have that luxury. It was Old Testament, down by the old rugged cross, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what is it? Taste of glory divine. That's what we grew up reading. And so now they have teen Bibles. They have I'm gonna at some point share some information so that you can get other resources and materials that's going to help your teen to learn about God, to learn about them in their own way, and for them to grow and develop in that relationship with God because God is on their level. Wherever they're at, that's where He's at. And over time, He will help them to come up higher and He will help them to develop. So thank you for joining me. It was a pleasure. This was really a good episode. I want to encourage you to take this. I always encourage parents and people who are parenting teens at this time to take this information and make it your own. Put your own touch on it. Adapt it and incorporate it into your parenting so that your teen can feel loved and wanted and accepted. They can feel good about themselves. They can be encouraged in their hearts that, you know what, they have a purpose. God has a plan for them. Okay. And that it's a good plan, Jeremiah. It's a good plan for them. Okay. And encourage them in those things. And again, it's not about being the perfect parent, but it's about parenting your teen perfectly for them, right? Being the perfect parent for them. So it's not about being perfect, but parenting perfectly for them and being the best for them, right? So that they can grow up healthy and, make that final transition with confidence. Thank you for joining me. If you have questions, if you want to share, please email me at the number one at parentingafterdark at gmail. That's the number one parentingafterdark at gmail.com. And I'll be more than happy to share your information if you're giving tips and advice or if you have a question. I'll try to the best of my ability to answer that question for you. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great week. I'll see you. I won't see you next week because it's Father's Day. So I want to give a shout out to all the dads out there. We love you. We appreciate you. We need you. Despite what these new agendas and all of this stuff is going on with this woke agenda, we need our fathers. We need masculine men who are fathers. There is an anointing and a call on you. And we need you. We as women, as mothers, as children, as your children, we need you in society. We need your leadership. We need your understanding and your wisdom and everything that God has placed on the inside of you. We need that. And so we appreciate you. We thank you. We thank you for doing all of what you're doing. If you're not a dad, but you act like a dad and you've been in that role and capacity as a dad, it applies to you. Whether you're mentoring young people or kids, whatever. We appreciate you. We thank you. Have a great and wonderful Father's Day. And I'll see you the week after next. Take care.